All right, so we're talking about decomp today, and let's first start though with just domain kind of questions. All right. Right now I've got f of x here and g of x, and I've got d of f. What does that stand for? The domain of f and the d of g. You should be able to figure out what d of f and d of g are. Go figure those out right away. That is the first step on all your problems, if I were you, on these difficult ones, is you start by writing down the functions, and then you write down the domains of each function. All right. The domain for f of x is x cannot equal what? 0. You just take denominators and say not equal to 0. You take square roots and you say x minus 3 should be greater than or equal to 0. And then you say add 3 to both sides like that. So d of g would be x is greater than or equal to 3. Raise your hand if you had those right. Okay, good. Now, if I was doing a simple one, like f of x plus g of x, which, by the way, they would write this way. F plus g of x means the same thing. You just take the two functions and you add them. You take this plus that. Done. I just write 1 over x plus square root of x plus 3. That's it. So when you add them together, it's simple to do. And it's also simple to get the domain. You figure out the domain of f and the domain of g, and you overlap them. So on the simple ones, all you got to do is overlap the parent domains. I'm going to draw this out real quick. This is x not being 0. This is x being greater than or equal to 3. Where do they overlap? Right there, which is what? X is greater than or equal to 3. Or you could say 3 to infinity. So there's the domain for a simple one. Oh, wait, bracket. All right. But when they're more complicated, like f of g of x, I don't think it's that hard to do the f of g of x thing. It's hard to do the domain. F of g of x, I want you to try without me telling you what to do. Right now, just figure out f of g of x from these two functions. Write down what you think it is. You're putting g into f. So what's g? Square root of x minus 3. I'm going to put it into this function. If I'm going to put it in this one, where can I put it? In where the x is. All right, so I'd take this function, write it with a lot of space where the x used to be, a big empty spot, and then drop in this, square root of x minus 3. Do I really have to have the parentheses? No, because this has a square root, and square root acts like parentheses. All right, so final answer, 1 over square root of x minus 3. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Good. Now, see if you can remember the right formula for figuring out its domain. Domain for this thing starts with d of g. Remember that formula? Write it out from memory. You got to have that the sucker memorized. There's no other way around it. I kept thinking of different ways I could describe this to you and how it kind of works in a big picture, and it's just too hard to explain. I mean, I can explain it, but there's no like simple little way to think of it. You just got to get the formula memorized. There's d of g, and then you go g of x in d of f. Did you have the right formula written down? A lot of heads nodding. Good. Okay. Now, d of g, I know. It's right here. I just have to put it in x greater than or equal to 3. The whole left side is done. That's one of the two things I'm going to overlap at the end. This thing means like intersect or overlap. So I'm going to overlap this with the other side. The other side is more complicated. G of x, I know that. That's square root of x minus 3. In d of f, I know that. It's right here. X greater than, or no, x not equal to 0. So on these kind of problems, you're just trying to figure out what two things am I going to overlap. I got one of my two things. Now I got to figure out this side. Well, if I'm going to put something into something else, I'm going to put it in where its variable is. So I'm going to put square root of x minus 3 where the variable was, is not equal to 0. And now, I get that this looks tricky, but just ask yourself, how do I get x alone? I got to solve this. How do I get rid of the square root? Square root. When I square both sides, I do not get an absolute value. It's only when you square root both sides. All right, so then that drops off, and I get x minus 3 not equal to, well, 0 squared is 0. Add 3 to both sides, x not equal to 3. Again, some people get lost, like, where am I in this problem? Well, you just did the right side. The left side was already done. So now it's this intersected with that. Am I done? No. I have to draw my number line now. And draw two number lines right on top of each other. See where they overlap. Then you'll have your answer. All right, so it's x is greater than or equal to 3, overlapping with x is not equal to 3. So here's greater than or equal to 3. Here's one with not equal to 3 on it. Oopsie, not 0, 3. Where do they overlap? Right there. Is 3 part of the answer? No. So you could say from 3 to infinity, not counting 3. Or you could have said x is greater than 3. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Then you get the trickiest kind. What happens if we hadn't been doing f of g of x? What if it was g of f of x? We have to use a different formula? Yes, you would. Everything's backwards. Yes? Yes. It has to be an overlap. And see, this does not overlap with that. That's empty. That's filled. All right. So just for kicks, just write the formula for that from memory. If you're going to do g of f of x, everything's backwards. So instead of starting with d of g, you start with d of f. Instead of g of x, you have f of x. And instead of d of, I can't remember, we have to use the other one, d of g. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Then you have a good chance of getting those right now when we take that test. That's a big part of it. Okay, now let's talk about composition versus decomposition. Composition is where you take one function and you put it into the other function. Okay, I don't know which way it is in this case. If it's f of g of x, I'm putting g of x and putting it in the f function because it's inside. You start on the inside, take this, put it into this. All right, so in this case, it would be 1 over, and replace the x with square root of x minus 3. All right, that's composition. So what's decomposition? Decomposition is the exact opposite. It's where they don't give you the original question. They say, here's the answer. F of g of x is 1 over x minus 3. What was the question? It's like, what was f of x? And what was g of x? How do you do it backwards? You ask yourself, look for anything that looks like it's a separate chunk that could have been plugged in to the other function. Okay, like this right here is a separate chunk that I could separate out and make that the g of x. And if I take that out, it was put into an empty spot, which is where an x would have been. And so 1 over x must be what this was. All right. I don't know if some of you caught that or not, but let's try this one. So if I have this function where I know the answer, and I'm trying to figure out what the two original questions were, who thinks they have it? Several of you. Excellent. What do you think? You got it just a little backwards. The thing that's on the inside.
Oh.
Try it again.
So g of x.
X plus 2, okay. And if you took that part out, yoink, and put it over there, then what you have left is Raise your hand if you would have had that one right. Okay, good. Let's try another one. So if f of g of x is that, I know some of you are like, this is easy, and that's good. So this would have to be x plus 5, because that's the chunk that you can take out, replace it with an x, and then this would be 1 over x. Raise your hand if you knew that one. Okay, good. Let's do one more. This one. How many of you are thinking this along these lines? Okay, it's okay to do it that way. So then what would be left? 1 over x, square root of 1 over x. But this is where I want to stretch your mind a little bit. You could have done something different and still had it right. So far, one person seems like they saw it. 2, 3, 4. A lot of good oxygen in the back corner. What do you think? So, okay, what do you think g of x is? Oh, you're thinking the whole thing could be g of x. Okay. That is thinking outside the box, but because that's true for any function, you could always do this. You just write the whole function. And on the other one, you just put an x. That's cheating. Because you could do that with any function. And you could answer any question that way, but we will not give credit for that one. Okay? But it is thinking outside the box. I know it works, but we won't take it because it's just like you wouldn't have to know anything about decomposition. You could just say, oh, just call this one x, call that one the function. See, but there is another way. Mr. W. And this would be all of this stuff. Yeah. All you really have to ask yourself is, can I take this, plug it into that, and have it equal that? Yeah, I can. And so therefore, yeah, you're right. So there is more than one answer for decomp questions that will work. Yes? Good question. No. This one's, okay, maybe I misunderstood your question. Now that I'm thinking about it further, the question was, would there be more than one possible domain then for this? And the answer is yes, because the domain of this depends on its parents. So if you use different parents, they'd have different domains. And so, yeah, there could be different domains. That does bring up a good point, too. Some kids think that if they know the answer to f of g of x, that they can just look at this and figure out the domain. See, x just can't be -5, but that's wrong. You have to look at the parent domains that you have and see, as soon as you would ever use a negative number, it would have crashed right here. The f of x wouldn't have worked because you can't allow a negative there. Okay, so this function, even though it seems like you can allow negatives, you can't. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's the other thing, too. This one has a square root, so it wouldn't have allowed negatives either. But the point is, though, don't look at your answer here and try to just do the domain of that. You have to go through that formula thing. Otherwise, you won't get the right answer. Yes? No. It's a good question. You do not have to give all the possible answers. What you would have to do is you just are not allowed to say one of these two can't just be x, because that'd be too easy. Other than that, as long as your two numbers, your two things, can go into each other and make the right answer come out, you're right, and you don't have to think about all the possibilities. All right, let's do one more. Just noticing that scratchy noise. It's driving me crazy. Oh, because it's actually touching machine. I think you're right. There you go, good. I had another one that makes a crackly noise that was different. They replaced it this morning. They replaced it with this microphone. And I was thinking maybe it was causing the same problem. It's actually a different noise. Okay, so moving on. Oh, good. We're out of questions. I'm going to make one more up. Okay. F of g of x is absolute value of x minus 4 plus 2. Tell me what f of x and g of x could have been to make this work. If you figured out the little trick, this is like so easy, isn't it? What do you think, Mr. C? Start with g of x. If you say this is x minus 4, then you yoink it out, and what do you say the other part is? Careful. There you go. Good job. You see how if I put this one into this one, I would get this. Very nice. Do you get decomp? Good. So that's a nice, easy part of the next test. All right. So the main thing is to practice those domains, because those are the tough kind, especially the kind where you have a big old formula. And what I have for you for homework for today is a worksheet to practice some more domains, because that's the hard part. Those are the R3 kind of questions for sure. I think this is only an R2, but it might be a R3 that if they make it tricky. And your homework is right here. Let me see. I'll write it on a board in case you're following along at home. It's page 125, 23 through 30. Those are all decomp questions. And you know how easy they are, and there's only like 9 questions total there. And if you saw how easy they are, you'll realize those will be pretty easy. And then the other part is a composition worksheet B. And it's called a composition worksheet, but it's kind of the opposite of decomp. All right.